Grava.
Muito bom dia a todos e a todas que nos seguem neste último dia de um intenso, muito estimulante e variado encontro, mais propriamente o segundo simpósio da Antiguidade da Contemporaneidade à Antiguidade, desculpem, e eu estou aqui, como estive na abertura, hoje particularmente feliz para testemunhar aquilo que é um ato de gratidão. Agradecer muito aos envolvidos, o Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos da Faculdade de Letras da Universidade de Coimbra é uma das entidades promotoras, não esteve sozinho nunca, esteve sempre muito bem acompanhado, com as instituições que já conhecem, que suportaram, em particular no Brasil, também esta parceria, e permitam-me que saúde igualmente todo o público, quer aqueles que foram os oradores ou que estão hoje temos o grande gosto de poder ouvir um dos nomes maiores da historiografia grega antiga, o professor Irad Malkin, mas acompanham-nos de pontos muito distantes no globo, da Europa, no nosso caso, mas depois do Brasil, em particular com os nossos colegas em Feira de Santana, permitam-me que destaque esta universidade, e também, naturalmente, os colegas que nos acompanham em outros pontos do Brasil e, no caso do continente africano, uma saudação muito especial aos nossos, colegas e nossos entusiastas desta iniciativa, tanto em Cabo Verde como em Maputo e Guiné-Bissau, e já na Ásia, noutra geografia, em Timor-Leste. Enfim, a iniciativa do Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos é de, a partir do presente, tornar evidente o significado que os estudos da Antiguidade têm para entendermos e dialogarmos de forma crítica com o nosso tempo. Somos uma unidade que promove estes encontros amplos, à distância, mas também tem encontros presenciais e, no nosso caso em concreto, naquilo que é o panorama nacional e de reconhecimento também da investigação, é com gosto que hoje posso dar uma notícia fresca, mas que implicará seguramente no futuro dos próximos 5 anos da investigação que fazemos, em colaboração aberta a outras geografias e a outras vozes, e que é a novidade de que o centro foi classificado ontem, é uma novidade muito fresca, com a nota máxima de excelente naquilo que é, enfim, o ranking de avaliação dos centros em Portugal, e por isso obrigada a todos os que participam, organizam e que são os nossos colaboradores ou até investigadores integrados e visitantes, como é o caso de, em particular, permitam-me que destaque o papel do professor Dr. Praia, nosso investigador Brian Kibuka, integrado da nossa unidade, e também a doutora Camila Jordan, que esteve connosco, hoje não está fisicamente aqui nesta mesma sala, mas já nos acompanhou, e que é a nossa investigadora visitante também. Aos alunos do doutoramento em estudos clássicos, que são os braços fortes deste evento, quem o viabiliza, em particular um contingente muito significativo de estudantes de origem brasileira e, naturalmente, também a outros estudantes e a outros jovens investigadores. Sem vós, o futuro do conhecimento não acontece. Portanto, precisamos muito da vossa colaboração, do vosso empenho, do vosso saber, do vosso olhar crítico, mas também do vosso olhar construtivo. Eu hoje intervenho apenas para vos agradecer, do ponto de vista institucional, do Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos, que tem o seu espaço aqui na Faculdade de Letras, mas é, de facto, um livro aberto da Universidade de Coimbra para o mundo. manter-nos disponíveis e à espera do terceiro simpósio da contemporaneidade à antiguidade, que espero comecem a pensar já nele, para no próximo ano poder ser um maior sucesso ainda do que já foi este. E um bom dia e boa jornada. Hoje é uma jornada mais breve, que é de encerramento, mas de grande felicidade a todos.
Estou desligada, não, legal. Avisa. Perdão, meu microfone estava desligado, coisas da tecnologia. Pedi só para colocar o slide, fazendo favor. Obrigada. Bom dia a todos e todas. Meu nome é Patrícia Geraldo Sebastião, sou doutoranda em Estudos Clássicos do Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos da Universidade de Coimbra, integrante do coletivo Lucis e membro da comissão organizadora deste simpósio. É com o coração profundamente agradecido que chegamos ao encerramento do nosso segundo simpósio da Contemporaneidade e Antiguidade, Diálogos sobre Agenciamentos Culturais e Identidades. Foram dias intensos, cheios de encontros, partilhas, reflexões que ultrapassaram fronteiras geográficas, temporais e epistemológicas. Aqui, em cada sessão, em cada comunicação, ecoaram vozes do Sul Global e do Norte, em diálogo, em escuta, em construção coletiva de conhecimento. Este simpósio nasce do compromisso com a pesquisa, mas também com a transformação. Ele reafirma a importância dos estudos clássicos não como um lugar de cristalização do passado, mas como um campo vivo, pulsante, atravessado por questões urgentes do presente, colonialidade, gênero, território, espiritualidade, memória e resistência. A cada conferência, mostramos que é possível e necessário revisar a antiguidade sem romantizá-la, mas sim questioná-la, problematizá-la e recriá-la a partir dos nossos contextos históricos e sociais, a partir de perspectivas plurais e epistemológicas diversas de corpos e territórios historicamente silenciados. A presença de pesquisadoras e pesquisadores de diferentes países, de diferentes níveis acadêmicos, enriqueceu enormemente estes encontros. Tivemos debates profundos, momentos de emoção e, sobretudo, a reafirmação de que fazer ciência também é um ato de cuidado, de escuta e de afeto. Eu agradeço profundamente ao Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos da Universidade de Coimbra, representado aqui na mesa pela professora doutora Carmen Soares, pelo compromisso em fomentar espaços de reflexão, gratidão ao corpo docente, discente dos 3 ciclos e ao corpo técnico-administrativo pela excelência, hospitalidade e acolhimento. Agradeço também à Faculdade de Letras da Universidade de Coimbra, representada pelo seu diretor, doutor Albano Figueiredo, pelo apoio institucional e pela abertura ao diálogo interdisciplinar. O apoio aos estudos clássicos na Faculdade de Letras de Coimbra tem sido fundamental, pois permitiu que agora o Sul Global encontrasse no centro um acolhimento e espaço para o desenvolvimento de pesquisas que mudarão realidades em nossos países. Esta parceria tem sido um pilar essencial na construção de novas perspectivas e na promoção da excelência acadêmica. Gostaríamos de expressar nossa sincera gratidão ao professor Dr. Irad Malkin, renomado historiador da antiguidade, que gentilmente aceitou nosso convite para proferir a conferência de encerramento deste simpósio. Sua abordagem inovadora sobre as migrações e os fluxos culturais do mundo antigo certamente enriquecerá nossas discussões e proporcionará novas perspectivas sobre as interações culturais na antiguidade. Agradeço aos participantes de Portugal, Angola, Brasil, Moçambique, Cabo Verde, Guiné-Bissau, São Tomé e Príncipe, Timor-Leste, Israel, Países Baixos e Argentina, cuja diversidade enriqueceu profundamente os debates e trocas de saberes ao longo deste encontro. Aos colegas do coletivo Lucis, especialmente a doutora Camila Jordan, que também está aqui nessa mesa, e ao doutor Brian Kibuka, cuja liderança tem sido essencial para o crescimento e desenvolvimento de nossas ações. É com grande orgulho que testemunhamos o impacto positivo que temos gerados no contexto acadêmico e cultural. Agradeço ainda a todos os integrantes da comissão executiva, da comissão organizadora, aos conferencistas, mediadores e estudantes que submeteram seus trabalhos às comunicações. O vosso empenho fez desse simpósio um evento verdadeiramente plural e enriquecedor. Este evento contou com a participação de 90 conferencistas e moderadores, distribuído entre 30 sessões, incluindo 3 minicursos, uma sessão de abertura, um encerramento e um encontro literário. Durante o simpósio, realizamos 19 mesas de comunicação, com a colaboração de 14 moderadores e a apresentação de 67 trabalhos. Saímos daqui transformados, mais fortes, mais conectados e com ainda mais certeza de que o caminho do conhecimento é também o caminho da escuta e da colaboração. Que este simpósio não seja um ponto final, mas uma vírgula, que os diálogos continuem, que os encontros se multipliquem e que as investigações críticas e comprometida com a justiça siga sendo o norte da nossa travessia. Muito obrigada e até o próximo encontro.
Bom dia. Ronald, pode colocar também, por favor, os slides. Slide, primeira apresentação, por favor. Isso. Eu sou Camila Alves Jordão, como a Patrícia falou, uma das lideranças do coletivo Luzes. E, caros colegas e participantes, é com profundo sentimento de gratidão, júbilo e responsabilidade que me dirijo a vós neste momento solene de encerramento do 2º simpósio da Contemporaneidade à Antiguidade, Agenciamentos Culturais e Identidades, cuja realização entre os dias 24 de março e hoje, 16 de abril de 2025, representou um marco incontornável para os estudos acadêmicos no espaço lusófono e além dele. Durante estas semanas de intensos e profícuos encontros, tivemos a rara e preciosa oportunidade de construir uma verdadeira ágora de pensamento crítico, na qual o diálogo entre a antiguidade e a contemporaneidade se fez vivo, pertinente e urgentemente necessário. Reuniram-se aqui investigadores e investigadoras de áreas tão diversas quanto as letras, a história, a filosofia, a psicologia, a psicanálise, as artes audiovisuais e a antropologia. Todos e todas imbuídos do propósito comum de pensar os agenciamentos culturais e as identidades sob uma perspectiva inter, multi e transdisciplinar. A riqueza deste encontro reside não apenas na pluralidade epistemológica que o caracterizou, mas, sobretudo, na diversidade de vozes, experiências e proveniências que o constituíram. Destacamos com imenso apreço a participação de figuras de grande envergadura acadêmica e intelectual, e apenas para citar alguns, dizemos os doutores e doutoras Delfim Ferreira Leão, Dina Salustio, Brian Gordon Lutalo Kibuka, Patrício Batisquema, Gabriel Buza, José Luiz Brandão, Martinho Soares, Babalorixá Sidney Barreto Nogueira, Hernani Chaves, Raquel Matoso, Luiz Lomenha, Paula Barata Dias, Isaac Paz, Zaqueu Zengo e Babalaô Ivanir dos Santos, e cujas contribuições enriqueceram sobremaneira os debates aqui travados. Ao citarmos alguns nomes de tanto que estavam compartilhando conosco seus saberes e pesquisas, podemos demonstrar efetivamente a pluralidade que tanto buscamos, possibilitando novas vozes. Este simpósio demonstrou com clareza a potência do Sul global na produção de conhecimento rigoroso, criativo e comprometido com as urgências do nosso tempo. Foi possível, com efeito, conectar distintos continentes e fazer ecoar as vozes do mundo lusófono, criando um espaço de articulação que busca romper com a dicotomia de centros e periferias, unindo saberes ancestrais com as práticas contemporâneas, numa rede viva de partilhas e construção coletiva. Tal como foi aqui salientado na intervenção anterior da Patrícia, os números que o evento alcançou são testemunhos inequívocos da repercussão e da força que brota do encontro entre o Sul e o Norte globais. Encontros estes que, longe de serem pontuais, constituem cada vez mais o terreno fértil a partir do qual se pode, de fato, construir o novo. Importa ainda salientar que todas as sessões e mesas de comunicação permanecerão acessíveis no canal do YouTube do evento, permitindo que o conhecimento gerado continue a circular e frutificar. Além disso, encontra-se em fase de produção o livro com os textos das conferências do primeiro simpósio, ao passo que o volume referente à segunda edição em breve iniciará também a recolha dos materiais para a sua construção. Iniciativas essas que reforçam o nosso compromisso com a difusão ampla e qualificada do saber. Não poderia deixar de fazer aqui um agradecimento profundamente reconhecido ao Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos, da Faculdade de Letras da Universidade de Coimbra, cuja presença e envolvimento se fizeram sentir desde a gênese deste projeto. A todos os seus membros docentes, investigadores e ao corpo técnico, o nosso mais sincero agradecimento. Em especial, rendemos homenagem à professora doutora Carmen Soares, coordenadora do Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos, que desde a primeira edição deste simpósio nos brindou com o seu apoio firme, incentivo generoso e confiança inabalável na importância dos debates que aqui propomos. Sem o seu compromisso e visão, muitos dos caminhos trilhados não teriam sido possíveis. Agradecemos de forma muito especial não apenas aos conferencistas e comunicadores, mas também àqueles e aquelas que estiveram conosco na incansável organização e execução deste grandioso evento. O coletivo Lucis, cuja dedicação tornou possível a realização técnica de cada sessão, o CEPAPEC, o coletivo ativista em psicanálise, educação e cultura, que traz a pulsante contribuição dos psicanalistas periféricos, o coletivo dos discentes negros do PPG, de Ciência da Religião da PUC São Paulo, que alargava as conexões dentro do Brasil, o Grupo Nina Simone, atuante nas questões de gênero, e o Programa de Pós-Graduação em Estudos Linguísticos da Universidade Estadual de Feira de Santana, presença constante e atuante na construção desse espaço. A todos, todas e todes, o nosso mais sincero agradecimento. Concluo esta intervenção com a honra de passar a palavra à estimada Maria Freire, que terá a responsabilidade de moderar a conferência de encerramento do nosso simpósio, proferida pelo ilustre doutor Irad Malkin, uma contribuição de enorme relevância para o nosso evento e para o cenário acadêmico internacional nos estudos de antiguidade. Muito obrigada.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Freire. I am a master's student at the University of Groningen and the University of Coimbra. I would like to thank the Professor Carmen, Patricia, and Camila for the beautiful words. I would also like to thank you, the Professor Irad Malkin, for being present today and to give us the honor to attend his lecture. So, our closing session, it will be about the ancient Greeks, the drawing of lots, and the hopes for the democracy today. The Professor Irad Malkin is a distinguished historian specialized in the ancient Greek history and Mediterranean studies. He holds the title of Professor Emeritus in the Department of History at Tel Aviv University and served as a visiting professor in the Department of Classics at the University of Oxford from 2017 to 2022. And in recognition of his scholarly contributions, he was elected a foreign member of the Academy of Athens in 2019. Beyond his publications, Professor Malkin co-founded the Mediterranean Historical Review and served as its co-editor until 2019. And he also led the Center for Mediterranean Civilizations project at Tel Aviv University until 2017. And in 2014, Professor Malkin received the Israel Prize in History for his groundbreaking research on ancient Sparta and Greek migration. And the award committee highlighted his innovative use of cross-disciplinary methods and his significant contributions to historical methodology, and particularly his application of network theory. So I would like to thank you, your presence, Professor. I'm really happy for being here today. And after the professor lecture, we will have some time for questions and answers. And I would like to pass the word now for the professor. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
May I start now?
Yeah, you can start now.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a great honor, and I'm sure that as often when we read ancient history, we also speak about our own modern world, because the historian of the past is, as ever, a citizen of the present. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is the drawing of lots. Sounds perhaps not a major question, but it is, in fact, a major institution in the life of ancient Greeks in the archaic and classical periods. And it has very significant bearings on our own types of regimes, calling them democracy, but having moved very far away from the ancient notion of what democracy was all about. Well, if we look at the first slide, there's a quotation here from Herodotus, who imagines a scene in the Persian court where three major advisors are suggesting different types of the ideal regime best suited for Persia. And those are monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. And Herodotus places interesting speeches in the mouth of each of his Persian speakers. And although he insists, by the way, that this actually took place, which is kind of doubtful, but in any case, when coming to the major virtue of democracy, here's what he says. The rule of the people has in the first place the loveliest name of all, isonomia, which is the first name for democracy. It determines offices by lot and holds power accountable and conducts all deliberating publicly. I emphasize, it determines offices by lot. These are words put in the place, in the mouth of a Persian talking to the future king. It's interesting because ancient Greeks hardly ever wrote about the wonderful merits of democracy. The texts are very few. Usually we get attacks against democracy, but in the funeral oration of Pericles, the famous encomium for Athenian democracy, the drawing of lots is not even mentioned, because it's not a value, as we shall see. It's the major device, but it does reflect values of egalitarianism. By contrast, when Herodotus is describing this to a foreigner, he does place the drawing of lots as the major feature. In fact, we will see also when Aristotle, in the 4th century, distinguished between what is an oligarchy on the one hand and what is a democracy on the other, he says quite explicitly that in a democracy, you have the drawing of lots. In an oligarchy, we have elections. I wonder how does this apply to modern democratic regimes that are only based on elections. So with that in mind, feeling there are some major problems in our modern democracies, and being an ancient historian, I engaged a few years with a colleague, Josine Blok, writing this book that just came out a few months ago, called Drawing Lots from Egalitarianism to Democracy in ancient Greece, published by Oxford University Press in 2024. And by the way, the bowls, the bronze bowls that you see on the cover are individual lots of citizens, in this case from southern Italy and Sicily, but it just shows you how the individuality of the person is identified with their personal bowls. So drawing lots, as I said, was not a value as such. It was more a device. By the way, this is the Greek world I'm talking about. It's important to note that ancient Greece was not in Greece, okay? Ancient Greece was all over the place around the coasts of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, not so much in North Africa, except, of course, for Libya and Cyrene. But I'm showing you the map not to be impressed so much by the size of the over 1,000 Greek city-states spread along these coasts, but to insist on the fact that I'm talking about the Greek commonality. The drawing of lots was a common feature of Greeks who otherwise might have been very different from each other. They spoke different dialects. They were living in very, very far away places from each other. And yet, some of the basic features of the drawing of lots. For example, you draw lots for your inheritance, not the primogeniture. You find this all over the place. So it's a common Greek feature, and we should be aware of that. Now, the collective equal distribution is the general aim. The rest are subsets. The drawing of lots, as you see in the slide, is not a value as such, but a device, mostly for collective, equal, or equitable distributions. You can distribute goats or portions of sacrificial meat. You can distribute booty and so, or lands. It is not relevant when sums are equal. Think of the annual distribution of revenues from the mines at Sifnos. The island of Sifnos discovered gold, and then every citizen got an equal portion every year. It allowed for a precise overlap between portion and individual equality. So the implication is egalitarianism. In this case, you didn't need to draw lots because 10 euros are equal to another 10 euros. You don't draw lots between them. So you draw lots between things that are equitable, but you really have to make the choice then. So somehow such values were essential to the archaic mindset. And later on, after 3 centuries of using the lots in a variety of ways, it was had also become political and became the basis of the Athenian democracy. But when we talk about democracies, let's think about our own for a moment. Because the viruses that attack democracies in the West are spreading. They're familiar, but have never before been so prominent. It's the breakup of social cohesiveness, the dwindling responsibility to the idea of a single political community. There's derision, there's alienation from politics. We find tribalism, sectarianism, populism, civil strife, and the immense power wielded by interest groups and political lobbies. That's today. There is, however, a way to cut the Gordian knot, to return to the roots and listen to the inventors of democracy, because the ancient Athenians found an inoculation against this virus. They used lotteries to select and to rotate. And each year, some 15% of the mostly male citizens fulfilled a wide spectrum of public functions. 10 government ministers, the archons, were selected by lottery, as were 500 council members, 11 members of the board to oversee the docks, 6,000 judges, priests, sometimes priestesses, and many more besides. Unlike most ancient societies, in Athens, the term citizenship included women too, albeit with no political rights in our own sense. Aside from the selection of office holders in Athenian democracy, procedural lotteries that established turns determined, for example, who would chair the Supreme Council, the Boule, for 24 hours. to see constant rotation, constant mixture. So think, for example, suppose you're an Athenian male citizen and you have been selected by lot to be among the 6,000 judges this year. So first there was that selection by lot. And now they draw lots to see in which panel you'd be sitting. And the minimum is 200. And then they'll draw lots to see which case you'll be judging. So you see, the chances of manipulating or influencing a jury of judges of that nature are almost nil. You never know. You don't even know what case they're going to try. You don't even know what panel they're going to be in. And in short, and there are too many of them to bribe, too expensive. There's one case, alleged case of an attempt to do that, but otherwise, no. So in such a system, there was no room for political parties in our own sense, and lobbies representing special interests were almost impossible to maintain because you could never know whom to influence. There was the frequent rotation, the relatively short periods of office, and the large numbers involved. The lottery is never ambiguous. The results are always clear. Today, candidates often smear each other and the losers bear a grudge. However, since the lottery is impersonal, resentment against persons who got their position through the drawing of lots, not through some political manipulation, but through the drawing of lots, that resentment disappears and facilitates the entire political process. The Greek political lottery was not just an efficient mechanism. Well, it reflected sets of values that we should consider important for our own democratic regimes, but sadly are hardly manifest today. When Aristotle defined the state, his essential term is partnership, koinonia, and with good reason, since modern democracies have betrayed the ancient Greek imperative of metechein tes poleos, which means sharing together in the city. Any citizens was just like, equal to, homoios, any other citizen, but he would deserve equal, isos in Greek, portions of the law. You noticed before when we read the passage from Herodotus that he doesn't call democracy demokratia, he calls it isonomia. It took about 50 years until the term democracy as such settled in. Isonomia, what does it mean? Well, there's isos element here, namely precisely equal, as in mathematically equal, and nemein, the verb nemein, which means to assign, to allocate, to give, to. So isonomia basically, when we say equality before the law, Greeks would say, well, literally, wouldn't say it that way, an equal portion for every individual of the law, this kind of abstract concept of the laws. And it is fascinating that actually almost in the same year when the Athenian when the Athenian isonomia was established, that year there were reactions against it, and the Athenians conquered chunks of the island of Euboea and distributed equal lots to settlers by lot, equal lots by lot. And the point being that here, at exactly the same time, you have a very concrete expression of isonomia, namely equal allocation, and isonomia in the sense of equality of law. So, and this happens at the same time when, right after Cleisthenes had his democratic reforms, and the Athenians were in Euboea. So you have the concrete and the abstract actually happening at the very same time. Today, well, unlike today, when we delegate power to elected representatives, in Athens, the idea of a citizen as a sharer took very concrete expressions in the forms of actual participation, whether through the posts distributed by lot or directly in the assembly, which enacted laws. The assembly, the ecclesia, let's remember, a sovereign body, that was not chosen by lot. The notion of representation that is so prominent in today's regime seems not even to have existed. Most significantly, the lot involved a much higher proportion than today of citizens for whom the polis transcended their own specific interests. Now imagine an Athenian would be chosen to the board overseeing the docks in the Países. But imagine if you, each one of you listening to this lecture, would be elected by lot to serve for 2 weeks a year, not more, as a board supervising your national airport, okay? Equivalent to the ancient Países. Think how much you'd learn about the economy, about the va-et-vient, about transportation, about tourism, whatnot, through that single thing. But you don't usually. You just read a paper and maybe there'll be an item about the airport once every 3 months or so. So there's the difference, the kind of involvement that the drawing of lots allows and sometimes forces, in a sense. Because the point is that in Athens, politics became a duty rather than a mere right. Western societies are in danger today of being torn apart by sectarian identities, the opposite of sharing together in the state. That sharing can only happen when citizens actually participate in frameworks that are mixed by lot, as happens with our contemporary, very tiny juries of 6 or 12 in Europe and in the United States. Again, the minimum number of Athens was 200. Too many discrete life experiences in the modern world encourage alienation and the shedding of the political from personal priorities. The process is ongoing today, dangerously fragmenting societies. But ancient Greeks, not just the Athenians, had their answer. A major role for the lot was a mixture of society. In Athens, people from all walks of life, living in areas that were sometimes quite distant from each other, were allotted into 10 civic units called tribes, which formed the basis for most Athenian lotteries. For example, 50 men from each mixed tribe were chosen by lot each year to serve in the Supreme Council. Today, sectarianism had become the blight of democracy that could rip society apart, a process that social media and its own tribes amplifying in disturbing ways. The lot and the mixture it mandates would easily prevent this. To get an idea of the spectrum of issues and subjects that are involved, let me tell you a little bit about the table of contents of this book. You will see that the political comes at the very end. They have the lottery mindset, that's the first part, religion and society. Lottery is divine and human, the world of the Homeric epics. When does the lot reflect the will of the gods? Lots, oracles, divination, and the notion of Moira. Sacrifice and feast, social values, and the distribution of meat by lot. In part 2, I study equal and fair, inheritance, colonization, and mixture. Then the chapter on partible inheritance by lot, drawing lots and the Athenian stage, founding cities and sharing in the polis, equality, allotment, and civic mixture. In the third part, superbly written by Josine Blok, analyzes the lots in governance in Athens and elsewhere. And Elena Jaffe added an appendix, independent research about the vocabulary, the ancient Greek vocabulary of the lot. So that was the book. In 506 BC, Cleisthenes the Athenian founded the Isonomia, the Athenian democracy. And I'm not going to discuss his reform. This is very detailed, complicated, not always, always certain about the details. But the major thing to point out is that the foundational act of the Athenian democracy was the drawing of lots. It was a drawing of lots in order to mix up, to reshuffle the deck of Athenian citizens and allow more people to become citizens through the process. So basically, Attica was divided into 3 regions, city, hills, and coasts. Somehow through a unit called Trites, they were all divided, split up into 10 tribes, when each tribe is composed from the 3 regions, here, here, and here, for example. Why? Because this kind of mixture cuts through the entire network of patrons and clients, the strong and the weak, the powerful and the dependents, because suddenly your aristocrat who might have intimidated you yesterday is now in a different region altogether. This kind of mixture, the reshuffling of the deck, is really the foundation act of the citizens. And it's important to remember that when mixed by lot, citizens depart from their tribe, original sort of biological tribe, as it were, and find themselves working together, especially to avoid civil strife. I analyze a fascinating inscription. Hellenistic inscription tells about the small ancient city of Nakone in Sicily that had been torn in 2 by civil strife. There was almost a war, almost violent. So then they invited 5 arbitrators to come from another city. They weren't even Greeks, who came and created by lot 60 pairs of brothers, as it were, 1 from each section, and then added 3 more to each couple. So you got 60 pentads, 60 units of 5 persons each, all mixed together. There's always always a majority of 1, at least, in each pentad. And these guys had to sit down and discuss the entire questions of their life in the city, not just that about which they were quarreling. And the whole thing ends up with this temple to Harmonia, to the goddess of harmony and peace in the city. And there's no more civil strife. There's a new mixture done by the drawing of lots. That's precisely the point, to put people together that otherwise wouldn't talk to each other, as it were. Okay? So such mixture lotteries reshuffle the deck of society. The lot creates artificial ties that transcend entrenched political and social clusters. Such lotteries bypass deep-rooted, pre-existing lines of separation, implying an overarching homogenization of the political community. In fact, that is how our story with democracy begins. After decades of tyranny and its distinct power bases, the constitutive act of founding the Athenian democracy was to reshuffle citizens from different localities, as we see, and distribute it by lot into new multi-regional units. It was this random device that gave the Athenian democracy a new cohesiveness. The random device provides cohesiveness. The importance of mixture is supported by the network theory, which I analyzed in a former book called Small Greek World, as the strength of weak ties. Discrete networks, think of patronage, kinship groups, constitute what Mark Granovetter calls strong ties. Since clusters of strong ties are often relatively small, it is difficult to reach out from them. It is rather the weak ties that hold a society together, not a strong one. Think of looking for a job. Okay, so the mother of a cousin of a friend of my daughter hears about a new job. Now, she obviously doesn't belong to my close circle, so you would never hear of it if you were confined to your strong yet very narrow little circle. Social systems based on strong ties can become fragmented and incoherent. New ideas will spread slowly, and scientific endeavors will be handicapped. In other words, the mixture creates weak ties, which can form an all-encompassing, strong, and dynamic connectivity in society. In other words, a political community based on strong ties is weak. A political community that is based on weak ties is strong. Now, how about elections? Elections, we know from modern democracies, imply choosing representatives who would be the best men to do the job, as Thomas Jefferson, for example, thought. He believed in the natural existence of best men and recommended to John Adams, I'm quoting, a pure selection of these natural aristoi into the offices of government. In ancient Greek, the words "the rule of the best" spell simply aristocracy. Today, instead of a top-bottom rule of kings by the grace of God, we have a top-bottom rule of elected officials for fixed terms, drawing their authority from the people. However, the vertical direction, top-bottom, remained the same since the time of the pharaohs in ancient Egypt, even in liberal Western democracies. As the French scholar Bernard Manin, in his study of representational governments, has shown, both the French and the American revolutions preferred elections to the equality of democracy. I'm quoting, representative government was instituted in the full awareness that elected representatives should be distinguished citizens, socially different from the ones who elected them. By contrast, Aristotle thought that there should be no such distance between citizenship and rule. Political freedom consisted of governing and being governed in turn, rotation, in turn. Instead of the top-bottom approach, the use of the lot in politics implies a horizontal view of society, a horizontal view, a government truly by the people, involving all citizens, who are both the source of power and of sovereignty, which is not delegated to representatives. As Thomas Jefferson reminds us, elections are about elites, aristoi. Nobody summed it up better than Aristotle when he said, as I said at the beginning, elections are the salient features of oligarchies, whereas democracies are based on the lot. Democratic Athens kept extending the use of the lot while efficiently running the state for more than 2 centuries before being subjugated by others. You know, recently he died, Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize laureate of economy and psychology. One of his great discoveries, it sounds strange, was that people don't believe facts, people don't believe truth. And when I talk about the subject to colleagues, even professional historians, there's always kind of a sneer, kind of mocking me. Come on, it's not possible. Such a regime today. Maybe it was good for this tiny village in ancient Greece that thought it was a city, but no, not really. But that is not true. Athens' population was almost the size of that of Iceland today. Athens' population was not run by computers and internet, by a block of stone called kleroterion in later periods. And it worked efficiently and fine for amazingly long time. Basically close to the time that modern democracies exist. So do believe truth. It worked. The experiment has been done already. Should we reintroduce the lot into politics? It will be undoubtedly an excellent tool for increasing the level of sharing in the polis. I'm sorry, there it is. And there are experiments being done today. For example, there is the Sortition Foundation in Great Britain. There's a new journal coming up, the Journal of Sortition, which is precisely mostly for political scientists and so on. And the projects of mini publics and citizen assemblies have been going on for a while. The Oxford Handbook of Deliberative Democracy, there's already a handbook, which means it's around. And of course, there's another slide about mini publics. And here you have a variety of publications about the idea of creating citizen committees chosen by lot, who will serve as a kind of a buffer between politicians and the general public. So some current thinkers mostly with political science orientation recommend precisely this, pointing out the obvious advantages of the lot as a corrective mechanism of the system. Suggestions range from revising the existing political mechanism to introducing new buffering organs into politics, like those citizen committees. And you could see that no such buffer had existed when the British had their Brexit referendum. Less than 52% voted to leave the EU, many admitting to ignorance, whereas the two Irish referenda, 2015, 2018, that permitted same-sex marriage and abortions, had been prepared by citizen committees chosen by lot. It took a long time, and people had time to learn and inform themselves. And the result is astonishing. For Catholic Ireland, almost 70% in favor of both. But where did the ancient Greek idea come from? Not just from the whole spectrum of practices, but especially from the mindset of viewing society horizontally, with each individual discretely defined, equal, and interchangeable with another. All this had a long history before anyone had thought of introducing the drawing of lots into the political sphere. Today, various suggestions to reintroduce sortition to politics are locked in a discourse that is too narrowly political. I'm thinking of Emmanuel Macron's recent or the suggestion to change the House of Lords in Great Britain should be chosen by lot. That's all very nice, but we cannot simply adapt an ancient device to modern constructs without understanding and accepting the mindset of sharing and equality that were sadly different from our own. The Greek lot was directly linked to a whole set of values and practices of which politics was but one late expression. The social perspective involved the horizontal view of society as made up of people sharing equal portions later of the state and rotating interchangeably with each other. During 3 centuries before the invention of democracy, the lottery mindset had developed with a remarkable set of egalitarian values and a perception of the individual as holding an equal portion. What is a mindset, or an egalitarian mindset as such? This is the way I define it. I'm sure I'm not very original here. A collective mindset is a common mental frame of reference that endures through time and is expressed when reacting to similar contexts and issues. It may be self-aware or not, and can be expressed in language, values, myths, collective representations, and implementation in practice. A mindset is tantamount to, that is how we do things, based on values, customs, and traditions that form a world view. The first introduction of the lots came, as we saw, with a foundation of Cleisthenes. And now that we see the interface between the 3 centuries that preceded democracy and democracy itself, we should consider what kind of lotteries were there altogether. So I define 5 basic categories. There's a distributive lotteries that define the contours of the relevant group or community, which is also sovereign to decide about the action of the drawing of lots. They express a horizontal vision of society, the reverse of a vertical top-bottom view of authority. Distributive lotteries were employed to distribute inheritance, sacrificial meat, colonial lands, booty, catch, and positions in the state. Even the entire cosmos and provinces of the gods were believed to have been distributed by lot by and among the Greek gods. And we have selective lotteries. They too imply the contours of some group. That's important to note. It implies the contours of a group, those in and those out. When picking soldiers for military campaigns, by lot. Colonists for new settlements, again by lot. Warriors for special tasks, and at some point even sorting out who were to be worshipped as ancestral heroes of Athens, drawn by lot from a list. We have procedural lotteries that were especially used for rotation and turns, such as guard shifts, stations on the race course, allocation of court cases, and rotating days of the presidency of the Athenian boule. In the 5th century, even entire theaters of war could be assigned to generals by lot. And we have the mixture lotteries were used to homogenize the mother cities at the time of foundation of new colonies, and to do the same in the colonies, mixing the nucleus of settlers from a specific mother city with other Greek settlers who joined the foundation. To mix the people to avoid dissension and civil strife, we saw Nakone, and to reshuffle the deck of the Athenian citizens to create the basis of Athenian democracy. And finally, we have the religious dimension, divination by lot, a discrete category for divining the intention of the gods for ad hoc issues, especially popular, the oracles of Delphi and Dodona. Take inheritance, for example. Okay, so basically the idea is, if you see in this slide, suppose we have 2 sons, okay, for example, to make it simple. The 2 decide in advance what are the equal parts, and then draw lots for them. In this slide, you see a further development of that. In the case that the 2 sons are not doing that, one of them can leave, and each one of them is left with a full kleros, a full estate, instead of if 2 sons stay at home and have to split it up in 2. But in any case, that is done by lot, including the choice of the colonist who would go abroad, at least in one major case, was chosen by lot. So that is how it would work, and that is how people would expect things to happen. The best place, perhaps, to observe a mindset is actually religion, and especially myth. Greeks did not have a transcended God as a subject for whom the world was an object, as the 3 great monotheistic religions assume. Let there be light. The Olympians, the 3rd generation divinities, did not create the world. They were born into it and won their supremacy by violent revolution. In the Iliad, we are told how Hades, Zeus, and Poseidon conducted a lottery. Zeus got the heavens, Hades got the underworld, and Poseidon got the sea. The myth is also a good starting point to refute the somewhat facile notion that Greeks turned to the lot for divine decisions. They did that in the case of lot oracles, but that's it. Otherwise, the gods, you'd expect the gods to have drawn lot in order to ask the gods what to do. It sounds almost ridiculous. Already Hesiod, in around 700 BC, say, after the muse, tell how at first gods and earth came to be, sings Hesiod in Theogony, and how the gods divided, dasanto, the verb is important, their wealth among themselves, and how they share their honors, timai, amongst them, hos timas di elonto. And here's Poseidon complaining bitterly to the messenger. He doesn't dare to complain directly to his brother Zeus, who ordered him off the field of battle. And he's resentful, and he's saying, no, 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 great though he is, this that he has said is too much. If he will force me against my will, me who am his equal in rank, homotimon. Since we are three brothers, all was divided amongst us, here you go again, dedastai, 3 ways, each given his domain, hekastos de emoretimes. When the lots were shaken, here again, palo is a major verb in the vocabulary of lottery, drew, lanchano is the most important verb perhaps, the gray sea to live in forever, Hades drew the lot of the mists and the darkness, and Zeus was allotted the wide sky in the cloud and the bright air. But earth and high Olympus are common to all 3. This is book 15 in the Iliad. So you see how important those things are. I'll skip this slide. This is just a story of Helios, how he first missed out on the lottery, and then the island of Rhodos was created in compensation for that. Now, we are not ancient Greeks and should not make assumptions that too easily bridge the gap between then and now. It is a mistake to have too much intellectual empathy. Ancient Greeks did not necessarily think the way we do, nor did they share our attitudes and worldview. However, whereas we may have enormous empathy for Greek reason, philosophy, and theater, lotteries, the origins of our democracy, are outside of our field of vision. Lotteries might seem weird, perhaps distasteful, smacking of ill repute and gambling. Maybe that's why nobody has written about it since the 19th century. I was amazed to find that out. Lotteries might seem weird, as I said. Paradoxically, rational scholars try to save ancient Greek rationality by claiming the Greeks used the lot irrationally as a used tool of divination. But the Greeks did not live in the manner of the dice man in the famous novel by Luca Reinhardt, or the people in Borges's Babylonian lottery. These ancient rational Greeks made a rational decision to apply a random device to so many aspects of their lives, and reasonably so. The lot implies interchangeability, which in turn implies equality. There's a soldier in the Iliad who recounts how his family conducted a lottery to decide which one of his brothers would go to fight in Troy. All brothers are interchangeable, all are equal, and the eldest could not expect any special status, even in inheritance. He has 6 sons besides, and I am the 7th, and I shook lots with the others, and it was my lot to come to this venture. It's amazing. Similarly, we see this with the 7th century BC, when the people of the island of Thera had to select those colonists who would go overseas and settle in northern Africa, in Libya. They used the lot. Here we go. This is Herodotus telling us that the Therians determined to send out men from the 7 regions, taking by lot one of every pair of brothers. And the 4th century inscription that quotes the original foundation decree from the 7th century, it says, they are to sail on equal and fair terms, isai kai homoiai, according to households, 1 son to be chosen from each family of those who are in the prime of life. And Herodotus tells us how they were chosen. The Greek lot expressed values of equality and fairness that are distinct from ours. Why? Because does fairness consist in getting what you deserve? For example, in the pirate code of Henry Morgan, the pirates getting booty distributed to them according to an equality of fairness. It's fair that the captain should get 8 portions and the deck boy should get 1/4 of a portion because the captain has a higher status. But no, this is exactly the opposite of almost a mechanical application of equality by Greek. Equal portions and to everyone. Here, for example, Achilles in the Iliad protests. He say, stay at home or fight your hardest. Your share will be the same. Coward and hero are given equal honor. Now, the fact that he's against it only means that this is indeed the custom. And there are several instances in Homer which I analyzed to show this. We have to add to this the idea of the middle. To the middle, esto meson, seems to be joined in Greek thought and practice. Because, take for example, Theognis, corpus of poetry, 7th, 6th century, very angry about new developments. He connects the social order with allotment. That's important, the social order with allotment. The poet employs the metaphor of the ship of state, and he complains that they seize possession by force, and discipline or order, cosmos, is lost. No longer is there an equal distribution in the common interest. Now, this is the translation of the Leib edition, but literally what the Greek actually says, when the sharing out, the dasmos, again, that's the theomai, is still brought to the middle, esto meson, to be shared out equally. So here we have the middle, the sharing out, and the drawing of lots all together. This is the scheme I developed with the Iliad or Theognis and others. There's the middle, there's a circle of participants that is exclusive. There are those who are not allowed to be in the circle, but everybody who is equal in terms of the chances and sometimes in terms of the portions brought to the middle and redistributed back again. For example, when founding a colony over newly possessed land, don't forget, land too is booty, settlers would draw lots for equally sized portions of land which were necessarily different from each other in terms of equality of soil and location. They were literally equal. In Greek, the word is isos. This is the mathematical sense of equality. So they were equal in size, but they were only like each other, homoios. For example, the field near the Agora and another field all the way out in the boondocks. Of course, they will be worth less, but at least they will be equal in size. That is the meaning of sailing equal and fair. Think, for example, the way Apollodorus imagines the original invasion into the Peloponnesus by the Dorians. I quote, when they had made themselves master of the Peloponnesus, they, the Dorians, set up 3 altars of paternal Zeus and sacrificed upon them and cast lots for the cities. So the first drawing was for Argos, the second for Lacedaemon, Sparta, and the third to Mycenae. And this is how Plutarch tells about the foundation of Sparta. The great lawgiver Lycurgus, a second measure of Lycurgus is his redistribution, ges anadasmos, of the land. He persuaded his fellow citizens to make one parcel of all their territory, this is the translation, literally to bring it to the middle, es meson, as one did with heaps of booty, and divided up anew, exarches, and to live with one another on the basis of entire uniformity and equality. Suiting the deed to the word, he distributed, again, the rest of the Laconian land among the Perioikoi in 30,000 lots, and that which belonged to the city of Sparta in 9,000 lots, to as many genuine Spartans. So you see the overlap, the individual, the portion, as it were, the equal portion, as it were, and the means to do this, the drawing of lots. Now, archaeologically, we note this phenomenon also in the earliest Greek colonies in the West. This is Sicily. Please note Megara Hiblaya over here. Here you get an overview of the site excavated by École Française de Rome. And what was remarkable about it, of course, I can't analyze it here, is the equality of the portions between these are the blocks. This is the median line of the block. You have equal portions for the houses on both sides. You have reserved areas a priori, which is very significant. And here you have a scheme of the division of the blocks in Megara. And finally, we are classicists and we need to work in ancient Greek. So the Gerda Henkel Foundation funded the project of collecting, analyzing, and creating an internet site. Just check kleros.org for the vocabulary of drawing lots. The pioneer was Boretsky, a Czech scholar studying in London in the 60s, but he was too much of a Marxist to be accepted by the establishment, as it were. And you can see even from his title of his work, excellent work, very limited, no inscriptions and so on, but still, survivals of some tribal ideas in classical Greek, the use and the meaning of lanchano, the teomai, and the origin of ison, echen, ison, nemen, and related idioms. Of course, you see, tribalism is not a word that is often used outside academic circles. These are the verbs. Those of you who are classicists could identify directly what we're talking about. And these are the tables of distribution, because sometimes you have to decide whether kleros is in fact connected with lot, or does it simply mean a piece of land or inheritance, which can also do that. So the studies and the research by Elena Yaffe has proven without a doubt that in a majority of cases, they're all connected with the idea of the lot. You see, when I was working on this, I had to run to different libraries. When I studied inheritance, I went to the law library. When I studied sacrifice, I went to the section on the history of religion. When I studied the distribution of booty, I had to go to the section about ancient Greek warfare. When I studied oracles, of course, it was Greek religion. When I studied klero in colonies, it was Greek colonization. But what matters is that though these categories are a single bundle, they all use the lot, and they all reflect one on the other. They overlap in terms of both the mindset and the practice. So we would never have seen the birth of democracy without the mindset and practices that made it both conceivable and possible. So it was not my purpose here to provide an analysis of the working of the Athenian democracy, or to provide a systematic critique of representative government in modern times, or even to suggest specific recipes for implementing the lot today. Distribution by lot are being attempted today, and hopefully there will be more to come. But I urge us to remember that the inherent problem with the political parties and representation, they get elected and agendas that often contradict those of their opponents in order to distinguish themselves. But once elected, at least they're meant to transform their perspective for the common good of everyone, taking into account the entire people. Sadly, candidates and parties are also dependent on money and are prone to yield to undue influence, a problem which the lot avoids altogether. Nobody has proven to date that problem solving by large numbers of intelligent people is any less efficient than problem solving by a few best and brightest, as it were. The latter, who often act as consultants to politicians, can hardly be charged with cognitive diversity. They usually went to the same universities, which is precisely what groups of large numbers of citizens selected by lot may demonstrate, if only because they would be diversely composed, overcoming biases of race, demography, gender, and religion. The lot does not select according to merit or expertise, a sore point of criticism already in antiquity. Plato has Socrates object to the use of the lot, saying he would prefer a professional sea captain of a ship rather than some captain chosen by lot. Wrong, replied the Athenians, or would have replied the Athenians. Leadership must be in the hands of the non-professionals. Otherwise, they develop interests of their own. And they went on to attach to each professional sea captain, they didn't give up on that, to each professional sea captain, a Kubernetes, a civilian commander, a triarchos, chosen by lot and assigned to a specific ship by lot as well. The Athenians also had the solution for professionalism. A board of 10 professional army commanders was elected annually, not chosen by lot, although the theaters of war themselves were, or the days of supreme command, and it depends on the period, also rotated by lot. Otherwise, by Aristotle's time, the lots came to reign. What started as selection in the late 6th century or early 5th century, only from among the highest echelons of society, quickly became ek hapanton, from everyone, namely all Athenian citizens. So it's time to readjust our aims and revitalize the ancient horizontal worldview instead of merely inventing another way for a top-bottom rule by elected representatives. The arguments against sortition mostly concern efficiency, professionalism, and long-term planning. Perhaps we need to think of the combination of the lots with elections as the Athenians did, and several thinkers today have also suggested. Perhaps we should enhance public involvement in various modalities, such as citizen committees. But most of all, we should take note of the egalitarian mindsets and values that concern the equal and like, isos kai homoios, equal and like portion of the citizens as articulated by ancient Greeks. It would behoove us to remember that our democracy, what our democracy is based on, and the basic mindset that led to its birth, the ancient Greek mindset and its egalitarian values, the ancient horizontal perspective instead of hierarchical top-bottom rule, the idea of citizens as sharers that made the ancient democracy possible. Their lack today might disintegrate our own. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for such a thought-provoking presentation. I really like of your exploration of how the ancient Greek used the drawing of lots as a genuine expression of democratic ideals. So it was both enlightening and inspiring. Thank you very much. And we already have some questions in the YouTube chat. Could we start with the questions now? It's okay.
It stops in the middle of a sentence here.
Okay, I can read the rest of the question for you. Just a second. So, considering the articulation between the lot as a practice of egalitarian distribution, and this
I'm sorry, are we reading a different question here? Considering how the drawing of lots functioned as a practice of equal distribution, seen in rituals, inheritance, and the founding of colonies, and how it was later institutionalized in Athenian democracy. To what extent can you understand the lot not just as a practical method, but as a symbolic tool that reshapes ideas of justice and belonging to the polis, especially the mindset that creates the sense of membership within its network structure? I quite agree. I think this is basically the fil conducteur, the line that goes throughout the book that I'm referring to. What's fascinating, as you point out correctly, is, in my words now, is this overlap between the absolutely concrete notion of drawing lots, the practice of it. Can you imagine how many times they did it every year in Athens with 6,000 judges, just that, and using the chlorotorion every day to assign cases and so on. So the lot is part of the mental landscape of any ancient Greek. So it's both symbolic and very concrete at the very same time. And I think that perhaps there were many Athenians who couldn't stand the drawing of lots all the time because it took so much time, but it did indeed involve them. And the great, already in 1960s, Bernard Crick, a British scholar, published a book called In Defense of Politics. Why in defense of politics? Because the idea of politics, and this is the early 60s, I think, people are alienated from it, they don't like it, they only think that everything is done on the top. You can't fight City Hall, as the American expression says. It doesn't say that you can't fight the president, by the way. They think locally. But in any case, it's only gotten worse. And it's exactly this notion, this mechanism even of sharing in the polis and then getting involved in your society, which goes against the grain of modern people are sinking into the screens and staying at home. So that's a great danger, so socially and politically.
Thank you, Professor. We have more questions. So,
shall I read it aloud? In what way can the use of lotteries in classical Athens be interpreted as a mechanism for incorporating a pre-political egalitarian mindset inherited from religious, go on, military distribution? Well, that's precisely the point. This is the great discovery, because the last book on the subject, written by John Wycliffe Headlam, in 1891, that's it, nothing after that. That too dealt only with the 5th and 4th century Athenian history. But the whole point, and from that you cannot get a notion of a mindset. But the whole point is, if you look at my last slides, with the various categories impacting each other, inheritance, sacrifice, booty, oracles, Kleroin colonies, notions in mythology and so on, you'll see that the whole framework of the ancient mind, the Greek mind, is different, allows for this kind of participation. So every time you get two types of enlargement of the circle of participants. All the people in the island of Thera were potential colonists. I mean, if there were two sons at least in each home and so on. And in Athens, you see the best case when you start ek prokriton, from the chosen one or the pre-chosen one, to ek hapanton, to everyone. So it's a question of extension. Once the idea is there, once the mindset is there, you can build on it and expand it. By contrast, if I talk to a modern political scientist and I start talking about the lot, he thinks of it, or she, in terms of how to do it, how does it work, is it more efficient? But that's not the point. The point is democracy. We have lost that essential feature of democracy invented by the Greeks.
This question I'm going to translate for you.
Thank you, please.
Okay. So if the lottery implies the delimitation of a sovereign group that decides among equals, what are the limits of this equality when the lot is applied to context of exclusion in Athenian democracy?
Okay, I'm not sure I understood the question completely, but it certainly has to do with inclusion, exclusion, which is one of the major points about the lottery. Because on the one hand, it is egalitarian. On the other hand, it is exclusive. There's no question about it. When you distribute lands and colonies, you don't want anybody who happens to be in the area to join in and get a piece of land. You want those who belong to the basic group to do this. When you distribute booty, you don't want somebody who didn't participate or wasn't part of the army to get the portion. So by nature, any distributive lottery, and most of the lotteries are procedural and distributive, by definition is exclusive. Just as citizenship in antiquity was exclusive to the polis. Only later on you get double citizenship and sympolite and so forth, and that also pretty rarely, and also always between pairs in your entire networks. So, yeah, I think the very nature of the lottery is exclusive, but that exclusiveness allows for equality, and because within the circle of the exclusiveness, the notion, you have this egalitarian mindset at work with its various expressions. And you see this, and you don't need the lottery for that. The rare occasions, such as the island of Sifnos, or when the Athenians discovered the silver in the Laurion mines, and they were debating whether to build ships, which they finally did, or to distribute 10 drachmas to each Athenian citizen. So again, 10 drachmas, you don't need a lot for that. 10 drachmas are always 10 drachmas. But this is the major point. The state as a sharing institution, and that was defined citizenship. Since most things are not precisely equivalent, the lot is there all the time to involve people and to allow them to participate in a way peculiar to the ancient Greek polis.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to ask a question too. So my question is about the new settlements of the Greek foundations. So how can we think about the relationship between the divisions and organization of plots of land and the possible connections with trade networks to become a hub in the Mediterranean network?
Okay, obviously, most Greek colonies did not become great hubs, okay? But all Greek colonies, as far as I can tell, I mean, it's always dangerous to make such a generalization about antiquity. But to the extent that I know, all Greek colonies share this feature of equal distribution of kleroi. A few of them, that depends on where they were settled, and for example, Syracuse or Massalia in southern France or Cyrene in North Africa, did become major hubs. In my book, not this recent one, called Small Greek World, published in 2011, also by Oxford University Press, basically, there I'm trying to apply network theory to the world of Greek colonization, to the rise of Greek civilization. And one of the things that I discovered whilst reading a lot of modern theories of connectivity, and that's why the book is called Small World, which is a technical term in network theory, you discover those commonalities that do emerge. You discover the role of the network itself, but you also discover what network theorists took time to understand between the studies of, I'll have to mention names because with due respect, Duncan Watts and Stephen Strogatz, who did the breakthrough studies and the mathematical discovery of 1999, that enabled us to understand network dynamics. What they didn't understand, and this is a scholar called Albert Laszlo Barabashi who followed this, that there's a tendency for network nodes to concentrate and work through hubs. Those of us who are young enough to remember the early 1990s and the internet from that time, it was based, you needed to have an address in order to find something. You didn't work with Google, it didn't exist, or maybe an embryonic part of it did, but the point was that it was a connection of many to many. And now it's still many to many, but you go through some central hub that directs you there. And this tendency to concentrate, to even create hubs, because Greek cities and colonies were not mathematical nodes on the paper. They were actual historical entities. They developed. So between the 8th century and the early 5th century, you see that historical developments of, instead of having lots and lots of independent colonies working this way and not with another, Massalia becomes a hub in the very Western Mediterranean. Carthage becomes the hub for Phoenicians in North Africa. Cyrene becomes a hub for Greeks in the areas of Libya and so on, and Athens, of course, and Corinth. So I do not think, however, that one relates to another, because if the equality, I mean, there were different historical developments, different political developments within those city-states, and the initial egalitarian mindset was not always translated into any kind of political equality, because oligarchies were all over the place. But there too, by the way, the same principles of equality very often exist in oligarchies. This connects me to the previous question, because an oligarchy is simply just like a democracy, but far more narrower circle, within which people are expected to be equal. So it's basically very parallel, very similar notions of egalitarianism, except the question, who is it applied to? Is it applied to a very narrow oligarchy circle, or to a much wider democratic one?
Thank you, Professor. I'm really happy for being here, and thanks a lot for answering my question. So we are going to put now some comments on the screen. So we have Sonia here. He appreciates the opportunity of to watch this conference. Also, the Joel, he said, "Oh, great participation, Doctor." It's Diana is thanking for the opportunity to this event. So let me check if we have some more questions. Oh, we have just we have one more question, Professor. In what way can the use of the lotteries in classical Athens be interpreted as a mechanism for incorporating a pre-political egalitarian mindset inherited from religious, military, and distributive practices?
Well, I think that's exactly it. I think the Athenian regime, based on lot, could not have emerged, would not have been accepted, were it not for the prevalent presence of a variety of practices and values of the use of the lot that had nothing to do with politics at the beginning. People ask, where did it come from? My colleague Josine Blok also suggests that it had to do with the selection of priests by lot inside a genos, namely inside a specific family or little clan, only from among whom you choose certain priesthoods. These are, in fact, very ancient legacies that are embedded in the Athenian democracy, because the new cults are always citizen cults. The older cults, like the Praxiergidae, for example, and others, but she thinks, and she certainly may be right, we just don't know, that that even within our religious circles, we used to do that, and that's before Athens became a democracy. Perhaps this comes from that notion. We just don't know, but it clearly did develop from those precedents. And we can see it both with the vocabulary too. It's consistent. It doesn't matter if you draw lots, as in Homer, to see who is going to fight Hector. They all throw lots into the helmets and shake it, palo, and then it jumps out, and then the Aias gets it. Or if you choose a council member for the Athenian democracy. So there's a consistent line of thought. There's simply a constant expansion of the application of the lot to more and more fields and areas, and especially so in the political area. One last point, in later inscriptions, you often find that when you get new citizens coming in, and I think your question also implied that a bit, what do you do with them? You distribute them, klerosis it's called, by lot into the existing tribes in the city. So the lot is also, I was talking about it being exclusive, yes, but in cases when Greek polis, prefer to open up its ranks, maybe to fill up its ranks with new citizens, that too would be done by lot.
Thank you very much, Professor. I would like to say that you're such an inspiration for me, and I'm really happy for being here today. So we're going to finish our session now. I would like to thank everyone who participate online and also in Coimbra. So thank you a lot, and have a nice day.
Thank you all very much, and goodbye to Carmen and to Camila, and thank you, Maria Freire. Do I pronounce it correctly? Probably not. For very nice handling and coordinating our meeting today. Thank you. Now, who's going to cut me off?
Thank you so much, Professor Irad Malkin and Dr. Carmen Soares and Maria. Now I will talk a few words for closing the event. Okay, Ronald, please put in the stage in English perfect. Now I will read. Caros colegas e participantes, ao aproximar-nos do final desta extraordinária jornada acadêmica, cabe-me expressar mais uma vez a profunda gratidão pela participação ativa e generosa e intelectualmente comprometida de todas, todos e todes que, ao longo destas semanas, contribuíram para o êxito do segundo simpósio da Contemporaneidade à Antiguidade, Agenciamentos Culturais e Identidades. Os debates que aqui se desenvolveram, as escutas sensíveis e as trocas intensas que presenciamos e protagonizamos deixam-nos a clara percepção de que este espaço se tornou um verdadeiro laboratório de ideias e um terreno fértil para a construção de novos horizontes epistemológicos, políticos e culturais. Fortalecemos redes, reafirmamos compromissos, lançamos perguntas e delineamos possibilidades de ação, sempre a partir da escuta atenta das múltiplas vozes que compõem o vasto e complexo mundo lusófono. É, pois, com entusiasmo e renovado alento que anuncio que o terceiro simpósio da Contemporaneidade à Antiguidade já tem data e lugar para se concretizar. Ocorrerá no mês de outubro deste ano, presencialmente no Brasil, sendo acolhido pela estimada Universidade Estadual de Feira de Santana. Este próximo encontro será, sem dúvida, mais uma etapa fundamental na consolidação das redes que aqui se entrelaçaram, redes de afeto, de pensamento, de resistência e de criação. Pretendemos, com este novo ciclo, ampliar os espaços de diálogo, abrindo portas a novas colaborações e acolhendo vozes ainda por escutar, sem jamais perder de vista a diversidade que nos enriquece e a solidariedade que nos une. Será um momento de reencontro, mas também de aprofundamento e expansão. Estaremos juntos novamente com representantes de diferentes países da lusofonia, reafirmando o compromisso coletivo de pensar criticamente o passado e o presente, com vistas a um futuro mais justo, inclusivo e plural. Convido desde já todas, todos e todes a prepararem-se para este reencontro presencial, que será certamente tão marcante quanto os que realizamos até aqui. Que o espírito que animou este segundo simpósio continue a guiar-nos até lá e para além. Muito obrigado a todos, todas e todes pela confiança, pela partilha e pelo entusiasmo. Sigamos em diálogo, em escuta e em movimento. Até outubro. Thank you for all. Thank you and bye, professors.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Fala em português. É melhor. Fala em português, assim. Obrigada a vós, que são, de facto, a alma deste evento, em que participamos, colaboramos de forma muito empenhada a aprender convosco, e seguramente o terceiro evento só nos permitirá a todos uma visão mais completa, sempre questionante, porque é isso que faz de nós sermos membros ativos da sociedade, é colocarmos perguntas e procurarmos as respostas, mesmo que às vezes não acertemos à primeira. Isso é normal, não é? Acertar logo seria até quase, eu diria, um ato de hubris, para usar uma terminologia grega, porque nós temos as nossas fragilidades, e quando pensamos que estamos a seguir o caminho, que é o caminho, a verdade é que há vários caminhos sempre para todo lado. E, portanto, em termos do meu posicionamento institucional, é um grande orgulho estar envolvida nesta iniciativa, que nos permite, agora também do ponto de vista institucional, dar corpo e realizar aquilo que é uma das vertentes novas do nosso projeto do Centro de Estudos Espaços Humanísticos, que é empoderar as pessoas no sentido de que elas querem ter a sua voz, que elas querem estar presentes, e não numa lógica absolutamente ultrapassada de dizer às pessoas, é este o caminho, venham por aqui, impor. Não. E queremos fazê-lo com geografias muito diversas. Temos isso no nosso plano, seja para o Brasil, com quem já nos relacionamos há mais tempo, mas também para o continente africano e, dentro das nossas possibilidades e interesses comuns, para os espaços da lusofonia no mundo asiático. Por isso, conto muito convosco para que o Centro faça este caminho. Em parte, já temos algum treino com o Brasil, mas precisamos de uma ajuda para chegar a outras pessoas que são valiosíssimas para nos conhecermos a nós, todos individualmente, como indivíduos, parte de um coletivo. Portanto, muito obrigada. O terceiro evento seguramente já está aí a nascer e vai crescer até outubro, onde voltaremos a encontrar-nos, alguns presencialmente, outros online, e não podia deixar de agradecer muito a quem esteve por trás destes ecrãs. Claro que os nomes deles foram sendo ditos, eles não passaram despercebidos, mas a verdade, hoje aqui, noutros dias foram outros colegas, mas hoje aqui com o Ronald e com a Tayela, que foram, enfim, as nossas luzes neste caminho para chegarmos aqui às câmaras e podermos estar a comunicar com toda a gente. Obrigada a eles, a todos vós, e contem sempre com o Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos, porque fazem parte dele em várias vertentes. Muito obrigada.
Eu gostaria de agradecer também, agora em português, agradeço ao Centro de Estudos Clássicos e Humanísticos, a professora Carmen, a Camila. Agradeço muito a Tayela e o Ronald, porque eles foram uma força muito importante na construção desse evento. Agradeço também muito ao professor Brian, que é a mente brilhante que junta todas essas outras mentes brilhantes. Então, eu estou muito feliz de poder estar aqui, estou muito feliz de poder estar participando da mesa de encerramento. Eu sinto que é tanto uma responsabilidade quanto uma honra muito grande estar aqui. Então, agradeço tanto a todo mundo que está presencialmente, agradeço a todas as pessoas que assistiram online, e vamos que vamos para o próximo. Obrigada.
Obrigada a todos e todas.